Okay. Well, good evening and good afternoon to everybody. My name is Mike Davila. I am one of the partners of College Inroads, and I'll be presenting to you tonight college admissions and affordability. This is a great topic, and this is one that I'm always excited to talk about because it is so poignant, so very important in today's landscape. Um, and I know that we've got a bunch of folks signed up. I know that there will be some folks that will join us en route. But before we get going, I wanted to give you a few administrative items here. Um, on your control panel, you have the ability to ask questions. Usually, when we do webinars, it's really, really loud. There, if we unmute somebody, there's inevitably a fire truck or a dog or whatever in the background. But for tonight, you'll be able to ask questions of me via the little Q&A box that's on your control panel. I think you have the ability also to perhaps text me, but I'm going to stay clear of that because tonight we just have a one-man show. My business partner, Anne Marie Hatfield, who I love dearly, had a death in her family, so she had to get on the road, be out of town, so she's not able to join with us tonight. Otherwise, we'd be the dynamic duo, and she'd be able to collect questions and things like that. So it's just me tonight, and if you could just use that Q&A function, what I'm going to do is go through all of the slides, and at the very end, I'll pull up the questions on my side and then answer those for you. This topic, which is both about admissions and affordability, typically takes quite a ways to get through. It's a lengthy topic, and it's one that generates a lot of questions, both from people who are consumers of higher education and my colleagues who are also education consultants. So I have about 45 minutes to an hour planned for us tonight. If it goes over a little bit, feel free to step off at any time. Um, Secondly, I'd like to really thank Carrie Diaz. She's a vice president at ZPrep, and also Anne Marie Hatfield, my partner, for setting this up tonight. Um, ZPrep, I am not. I don't. I'm not a rep for ZPrep, but I will tell you I do use it in my private practice, and it's been fantastic. So we'll talk a little bit about those sorts of things as we get going. Okay, wonderful. A little bit about my background. I graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, way back in 1994, a long time ago. I served 6.5 years on active duty. And I guess the reason that that's important is that my final tour of duty, I was given the chance to go back and teach at the Naval Academy. And that kind of started me down the path of higher education. When I was there, for example, I was on the faculty senate and had a chance to see how an institution of higher education, kind of operates a little bit from the inside. Um, at the beginning of 2000, yeah, about 2000, I became a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. So I became aware and gained an understanding of 529 plans, Coverdell ESAs, things like that. So some of the finance things were taught to me as I began as a financial advisor. I did that for several years, and in 2003 became an educational consultant. In '06, I went back for a master's degree at the University of Texas, specializing in higher educational administration. So um, I've been in private practice since 2011, and really I've started doing educational consulting work in '03. So this is my 14th season of working with students and parents as they navigate this landscape. So again, a lot of baggage, I guess, to bring into tonight's presentation. I have to tell you, though, from a presenter's perspective, I'm used to doing this interactively with people. So this is just me talking to my computer screen, and I don't actually have the ability to see your faces, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, I wanted to give you a little bit of an outline of what we're going to talk about tonight. What are the big pressing issues? And when I discuss this with parents, a lot of times cost is one of those things that tends to be a huge factor for all elements of the socioeconomic spectrum, and very few people really want to talk about this. So I want to talk about it right up front, so we can define some terms, so we can kind of put our arms around this and see how it interlaces with how we select schools and how we go about, testing and things of that nature. I will talk a little bit about standardized testing from a big picture perspective. I'm guessing that many of you are ZPrep clients already, so that you're getting some real specialized care in that regard. But I do want to talk a little bit about that and how that landscape has really changed over years. And then that kind of feeds into this big theme that I want all of us to take away from tonight. If we rely on the old cognitive map that many of us use as we approach college, we're going to end up in a position perhaps that's a little bit more stressful than if we understood the landscape a little bit better. When I taught naval strategy and tactics at the Naval Academy, I remember we used to teach Sun Tzu and some of his precepts from several thousand years ago, and he basically said, "Hey, if you know your enemy as well as yourself, you're going to be far, far better off than if you just kind of go in blind." So that is one of my goals tonight is to dispel some of the myths and perhaps some of the things that are just old information. In that spirit, I want to introduce this term, strategic enrollment management. If you're not familiar with this term, it is certainly not in the public's view, but this is one of the takeaways I took from that master's degree, that colleges are definitely businesses. And I want to share with you some of the screens and some of the things that they look at as they start to admit students, because it's all about them. They own this process. They are the ones who really have a lot of control during the process. And so I want to kind of talk about that a little bit, give you some background there. And then certainly, timelines, things like that. I'm not sure which years your students are leading up to college, but I'm going to give you some timelines and some case studies and talk about those issues as well. Okay, great. So the first question is a really big question. Why does college cost so much? And this causes raging debate amongst politicians, the public, college administrators, but really it boils down to a bunch of different things hitting us at the same time, kind of the perfect storm. First off, physical resources. Colleges are huge physical plants and they have to be maintained. And then you layer on top of that this idea that to attract students, they need to have really good things like great dorms and great physical fitness gyms and great programming. So that costs a lot of money. And you can see that when you go on campus tours, you will see these colleges dress themselves up very nicely. The intellectual assets, the professorate, these guys and gals, they take a lot of money off of the top line for the college. And so I often think about, gosh, what does a professor make these days? Well, it's usually pretty solid six figures, especially in the STEM fields. So many of these institutions, like right down the street from me, I'm in Austin, Texas. The University of Texas has hundreds, if not thousands, of professors that they employ. So lots and lots of costs there. Administrative staffing. This is something that really over the last century has been growing and growing and growing because of all of the programming that has to be done for students these days. And of course, that costs a lot of money to the institutions. Teaching loads over time have actually gone down a little bit. Underprepared students can affect the college in terms of its cost, because whether we know it or not, the college is actually investing some of their funds into each student's education for sure. So if a student is going to come into the campus and not have the prerequisites that are really required to be successful, colleges have to have remedial programs to bring them up to speed. And oftentimes they do not graduate in that 4-year time span that everyone's going for. So it actually costs the university many extra dollars that they're hoping not to have to spend. Division I sports, yeah, this is kind of interesting in the fact that a lot of football programs are actually not profitable. So we all think about the big Ohio State football programs and things like that, and sure, some of those really bring in a lot of money for the institutions, but then there are plenty of other ones that don't. So that's something that's driving cost as well. State appropriations. This is the amount of money that the states are actually giving the state institutions has been going down, and that has been going down over the last decade. Actually, this is not a new story, but I laugh because I was in New Jersey probably a year and a half ago for a conference, and the running joke from one of the state institutions there was like, yeah, at one point we were state supported, then or state funded, and then we became state supported, which was a little less. Now we've gotten to the point where we're just state located, so yeah, states are really not increasing higher education budgets at least from the perspective of the administrator. They'd like to see more. And then finally, competitiveness amongst colleges and consumers trying to get into probably, let's say the top 150 colleges in the country. Everyone's gunning for these guys. Even other institutions are trying to raise their stature in the rankings and other places so that they can become more competitive. So some of this is pricing as well, and we'll kind of see that as we go through tonight. Okay. And there's other things too that are driving the cost, but these are some major ones. So let's talk about this term of art that's called the cost of attendance. If you haven't heard this term of art, this is one that financial aid administrators use to describe a yearly figure that consumers pay. And that's books, it's tuition, it's fees, it's room, board, miscellaneous costs, it's travel expenses. All of those things kind of get rolled into a single cost that gets reported to the Department of Education and state higher education coordinating boards and things like that. So I liken this to a college MSRP, and I always laugh. It's like, okay, so what is an MSRP? So it's kind of funny. That is a manufacturer's suggested retail price. So for those of you who've bought a car anytime recently, yeah, that's the sticker on the side of the car. So nobody, after attending this webinar tonight, should be paying sticker price for college, even state institutions. Okay, so that's good news. And here before you can kind of see what the nationwide averages are. And some of these may be surprising. The average public university costs $29,000. Well, here in Texas, it's a little bit lower, but you may not be in a state like Texas. You could be in California, New York, other places where your average state institution could be, much lower, or in some cases a lot higher. I've seen state institutions where their in-state costs are running in the mid-30s. So again, these are just averages. Average public university for out-of-state tuition runs about 35. The average private university around the country runs about 45,000. Well, I don't know about you, but if any of you live on the coast, California, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, you could look at any of the schools around where you are and you're like, Mike, that's wrong. That is certainly not the average price for a private institution here. And that is regional. I will say that there are some other places in the country where, the small private liberal arts colleges are not running $60,000 or more. So that's a little hint. If we're willing to send our student farther afield, perhaps we're looking at some of the places that have lower costs of attendance just to begin with, for a more affordable fit. Then the elite private colleges run 65, 70 or more. And really, most of the Ivy League schools are in the mid 60s, but then there are other schools like Drexel, Tulane, places like that are running over $70,000 per year. So I know that that's a concern for a lot of parents. So I want to look at some other things in terms of mitigation, and we'll do that in a different slide. But first, what are the trends doing? What do those look like? Okay, so here is a slide that shows the last 30 or so years in terms of tuition and fee growth. This is put out by Bloomberg. And here you can see that tuition fees have been increasing, rapidly, more than anything else, more than medical care, food, the consumer price index, which is the proxy for inflation, 1,225%. And when I present this to families, what's striking and shocking to me is that, throughout this time, we can look at recessions, we can see market collapse, we can see tech bubbles bursting, war, all sorts of things affecting our national climate, and yet tuition and fee growth still continues. The troublesome thing about this is, if you're an analyst, you look at this and go, okay, tuition and fees, what about room and board? What about other things that are also part of the equation for cost growth? And those are not represented here. So certainly something, that is on a lot of economists' mind right now. And locally, I'm here in Texas. Here are some of these colleges may mean nothing to you, but I'm going to kind of share some things which are odd. And the whole point I'm going to make here is that we know some things, right? We've seen uh, rankings, and we know our quote unquote our local colleges. But when I'm here in Texas, I talk about, hey, what's the most expensive public university in Texas? Well, a lot of people would think, oh, it's University of Texas. Well, in fact, it's not University of Texas. It is actually University of Houston, which is not nearly as visible of a college as UT. So that's kind of interesting. Um, there are other schools like these guys here, Texas Christian, Rice, and Baylor. If you look at their pricing, 62,000, 63,000, 60,000 per year, you would think they would be on the same relative sphere in terms of rankings and notoriety and things of that nature. But, that's not really the case, because Rice is an extremely selective private institution that has an acceptance rate, 16 to 18% in that range, whereas TCU and Baylor have, much, much higher acceptance ratios than Rice. Um, Texas A&M and Texas Tech, these guys sometimes will jockey for position, and I've seen these costs flip-flop in years past. I make the point with Howard Payne, which is a small Baptist school in Brownwood, Texas. Well, hey, what if we're doing pre-med and we want a small environment? We just need a basic biology program to graduate, to go to medical school and get a high grade point average, things like that. What if we went to Howard Payne and got a $12,000 a year scholarship? Perhaps then this school might actually end up being less expensive than, say, U of H or another public institution. So, again, this is where we can sometimes see private institutions pricing themselves so they can snatch some good students away from big public schools. And then there's usually some shocks over schools like St. Edward's here at the top, which is a regional liberal arts college here in Austin. 83% price increase since 2009. That's whopping. I mean, people get really freaked out when they see that, but that's the way of that other graph. That's what's going on. And then up here, you can kind of see that, wow, only 55% of all public university students will graduate within 6 years at the very top. So, boy, that's kind of troublesome. How do we graduate in 4 years, not six? None of us went to school to take, well, hopefully we didn't take 6 years to graduate. But there are a lot of students these days who are doing that. And that's a whole different lecture that usually has to do with being underprepared for college, or going to the wrong fit for college. That can be the case. And in a lot of cases, hey, I went to school and I quote unquote, found myself, but it took me 2 or 3 years to do that. That's one of those things that, again, with these costs, gang, we don't want to do that this go around. With our kids, we want them to kind of go in knowing, at least, being able to hit the broadside of a barn, saying, okay, I'm going to be a biology or something in STEM. That's what I really need to do, so we can find a good opportunity in that way. Graduate in 4 years. Okay. Okay, so what can we do to lower our costs? And I think that is a really important thing to look at. Let me erase all these things here. Okay, good. So what can we do? What are the things that we can do to lower costs? Well, first and foremost, I think most people think of scholarship. Yes, we need to get scholarships. And the perspective I'm going to give you tonight is that scholarships are great. However, we really need to spend our time strategically. And not to say that we shouldn't go out looking for the what I would call outside scholarships, but we need to really think about how our time or our students' time needs to be utilized. Because in our day and age, scholarships meant, getting a Rotary Club scholarship that, entailed a little essay, and it was $500. Well, guess what? They're still $500, and they do require essays typically for that, or interviews. So my basic precept that I've told students is, hey, if you're studying for the SAT or the ACT, we really need to focus our efforts there. Wait, and spend some time doing scholarship searching, but perhaps not when you're in the glide path for preparing for these standardized tests. Why? Because when there's a graph I'll show you a little later that shows, boy, the money is not in outside scholarships like at Rotary Club or um, the local kinds of scholarships. The real money is in the hands of the colleges, in their tuition discounts, their merit scholarships, their packaging. Okay, so when I say scholarships, I'm thinking of the outside scholarship, not the scholarships that are being offered, from the institutions directly. Okay, dual credit community college programs. Depending on your area, these may be alive and well, or they may be non-existent. I will tell you that these can be really great in terms of cost containment for a lot of families. and they're springing up everywhere. CLEP. I mean, many parents back in the day did CLEP, and CLEP is the college level examination program. Absolutely something to look at. If you're taking notes, I would write this website down, and I would just go to the collegeboard.org website. College Board owns the CLEP exams, and you guys can do I say you guys, but your students can do CLEP now. They don't have to wait until they graduate from high school. It's extremely inexpensive. What I love about CLEP is that if you say, hey, I'm going to go to Georgia Tech, that is my school, you can simply go onto the CLEP website within the College Board website and see exactly which CLEP exams they will accept. Okay, so again, a great cost containment measure that very, very few people are even talking about, but certainly something to examine. AP exams, okay, for sure, many of our students have done AP classes. I know back in our day, sometimes we took the test, sometimes we didn't at the end of the semester. We need to test, right? But even if we don't hit the 5 or a 4, we could still go back and do the CLEP for that same class. Picking the right school. Well, that's really important, because what I'm going to say here is that not all colleges are created equal when it comes to discounting their tuition, giving out of scholarships. There's a huge difference between public and private. Amongst the privates, there are some privates that don't give merit aid, the most prestigious and visible schools. Maxing out grade point average, that's kind of, nice little bit of motherhood, but that's absolutely the case in the fact that there are some scholarships given by the colleges that are contingent on either class rank or grade point average, okay, or SAT scores, okay. Guaranteed tuition programs, these would be the prepaid 529 plans that each state has. So prepaid 529 plans allow you to buy tuition credits at a discount ahead of time, essentially. So a lot of times they're keyed to the tuition inflation over time. So you really get a great deal if the college costs continue to grow. And if you looked at that graph closely, none of us are seeing a big downward trend in that anytime soon. This one I laugh at because 10 years ago when I started suggesting this, I always felt like I'd start getting rotten fruit thrown at me for even suggesting such a thing. But I will tell you, more and more parents, gang, are thinking about this. What would happen if I go to the local community college? Well, here in Texas, we have some amazing community college districts, and many of them have articulation agreements with the four-year institutions that are here in Texas and beyond. So definitely check this out, especially with the cost of community college versus the cost of an in-state or private school. Moving out of state and established residency, I don't suggest trying this at home. This is a tough one. This almost always ends up with frustration and failure. But yep, every once in a while I hear of a parent who will, successfully move their student to a different state, have them not go to college for a year. They have a job, they have a dorm, or not a dorm, but an apartment, and then they start as an in-state rate person. Attending a work college. If you just Google work college, you'll see that there's a handful of these guys around the country where, in a nutshell, all of their students end up on a giant work study program, which is pretty cool. So not all of these schools are big public schools. So check it out if you're thinking about a smaller private institution. Demonstrating interest in the college. Wow. Well, this is another one of those things where I can't emphasize this has radically changed since we went to college, parents. Back in when I applied to University of Texas, first off, I applied to 2 schools, UT Austin and the U.S. Naval Academy. That was it. And today, that's a pretty big mistake. And a lot of people would say, well, that's just because of admissions. And I would say, no, that's because we really want to have some financial choices, at the end of the day. So what I'm getting at here is that we need to have a couple of colleges on our list, more than just a handful. I've always told people in the range of 8 to 10 colleges is a good general guideline. There may be a couple cases where we want to throw a few more schools on the list, or maybe a few cases where we have a few less. But that's generally what I would say is 8 to 10 is a good working number for most folks. But what I'm getting at here is most colleges back in the day, they didn't track whether you showed up for a visit. They didn't look to see, did you respond to our email? They're not looking to see, hey, did you find us at the college fair? Did you come visit with us and do an admissions interview when we, hit your high school? So many of us have students that are in good high schools. Well, admissions reps, their job is to canvass the earth for good candidates. So they go to better high schools. Okay. Well, when they come, they set up time to market basically their institution to the students. And if they have a chance to talk to your student, guess what? They're going to make note of that many times and put that in the admissions system. This past week, I had a chance to go to Houston for a symposium of independent college admissions counselors like myself, where we had a chance to hear Rice, Tulane, TCU, University of Texas, Texas A&M. All these colleges were speaking, and there's a panel discussion about demonstrated interest. And boy, let me tell you, they have some very advanced ways of tracking all of this. So think about showing up and showing some love for these colleges. Showing up on campus is a big one. Okay. ROTC or service academies, absolutely. This can, cut the cost of college completely, or to a large extent if your student's willing to do military service. Attending a less visible school, that was kind of like that scenario with Howard Payne I was just talking about, where you have a chance to go to a more less visible school for undergraduate, but perhaps a much more visible school for the graduate degree. Appealing for more aid and scholarships. This one I think is on the decline. The colleges are getting very, very savvy when it comes to appeals at the end of the process. But I would still say if you have a very gifted student and you're applying to schools where they're well positioned, this still could be a good strategy to get some more money. And then finally, be the shining star. Absolutely. We need to work the resume gang. We need to do some interview skills, things like that will help the student essentially market themselves and set themselves apart. The last one I would say is maxing out the SAT and ACT. And this is really where ZPrep comes in and shines. Again, in our cognitive map parents, back in the day, it was all about getting in. Hey, how do we get into Rutgers or Dartmouth or whoever? The SAT is a big deal because it's a common denominator. And same thing with the ACT. Well, over the last few years, you've all seen that the ACT has made some very minor changes, whereas the SAT has made some major changes to how they do business. And it's a business, okay? So these SATs and these ACT scores really are imperative for colleges for them to kind of understand a little bit about where the student is coming from academically, although they know it's not a great predictor of student success in college. I think I calculated it's like 57% of the rankings have to do with student quality in some way, shape, or form. And we have to be honest with ourselves that these SATs and ACT scores play heavily into that. So colleges, when they go to find the students and they buy names, by hundreds of thousands of names from the College Board and ACT.org to market themselves, they are looking to get the best students possible on their campus to increase their notoriety, their prestige, the academic level of their classroom, all of those things. So these are the questions that I think a lot of parents hit me with over time. How does a university treat these exams? Well, guess what? It really varies by school. Some small private liberal arts colleges may look at the SAT and ACT stuff and say, okay, yeah, it's important, but the transcript or the essay may be much more predictive or much more valuable to us to understand who to admit. Whereas large state institutions, some of which get 40,000 plus applications per admission cycle, 40,000? How are you going through those? Well, you've got a computer system that is looking at numbers, looking at GPAs and SATs and things like that. So again, very, very large variance depending on where the college stands in the rankings and visibility. How do we study? Okay, so let me see if I've got something going on here. I want to launch a poll here real quick. Parents, how many hours did you spend on actually preparing for these SATs or the ACT? And what I'd like you to do is just answer this poll if you wouldn't mind, and I'll kind of give us the tally here. Go ahead, be honest. Be honest. So some results are coming in here. I don't know if you could actually see the screen, but Um, okay, so we have 4 people who responded. Um, well, we've had a few people that did, some significant study, 2 to 5 hours. A few people did more than 5 hours. A couple people maybe did less than, no study whatsoever. The vast majority of people are coming in at 2 to 5 hours. That's what we're seeing. Okay, 2 to 5 hours. All right. So let me share those results. Here we go. So not a whole lot of responses to this poll, but you can see 2 to 5 hours is kind of the resonant number. Okay. So what do you think, parents? Do you think that that is alive and well? Should we, tell our students to do that as well? Maybe not. Most students are actually doing quite a bit more studying. In my own private practice, I would estimate that most students are spending 10 to 20 hours on prep at a minimum in this day and age. The goal typically is to get at least 100, maybe 200 points increase on their SAT score, and that usually translates to, I don't know, anywhere from 2 points to, let's say, a 4 point increase on the ACT. The most I've ever really seen on the ACT is a 5 point increase, and that is roughly equivalent to about 250 points on the SAT. So, bottom line is, this, in my estimation, I hate to be crass, but this is kind of like crack cocaine for colleges. Many of these colleges can't get enough of these SAT scores. Um, so we need to study. Okay, parents, Z-Prep is fantastic. It's worked really well for my students. What I love about Z-Prep is that it can be coupled with tutoring, which is another level of concern and care. I think that, students should, consider while they prep for these tests. How many times do we take these tests anyway? Well, the answer depends. What are we going for? What's our goal? Should we take it 2 times or 10? Most people will experience test fatigue at some point. So the average, I would say, in my practice is 2 to 3 exams. That's going to be about average. Yes, I have students who will take it a few more times. And then once in a great while, I'll have a student that's able to come in and just blow the doors off the thing from the get-go. That's pretty uncommon, I would say. Most students are going to have to take 2 or 3 of these exams. Do we focus on the SAT or the ACT? Well, Z-Prep has a diagnostic, which I think is extremely important for a student, especially early in the cycle, to do, so that you know which test to actually tackle. Because if we're going to spend 20 or 25 hours of prep for one and then have to turn around and do another 20 for 25 hours for another flavor of exam, why don't we just go after one and then just have a continuum of study just for that one exam? Okay. When do we take these exams? Well, most test prep experts will suggest that we start ramping up for it between the sophomore and junior year of college, not college, sophomore and junior year of high school, leading up to maybe taking an exam for the first time for real at the end of the first semester of the junior year in high school. Okay, that's just one glide path. There's many others, but that's probably the most common. Back in the day, parents, we did the senior year, right? And we applied to schools at the end of the first semester, found out, second semester was great. But everything on the timeline has shifted to the left. Okay. What about the SAT 2 subject exams? There's only just a handful of colleges that require these, and they're all selective private schools, Ivy League types of institutions. You just check with the admissions office or look on the website to see, hey, does Duke require a SAT 2 subject exam, or is it recommended? Well, if it's recommended, you might want to do it, because that, again, can set you apart from your competition. And the new SAT. Well, the new SAT was brought about because the ACT was crushing the SAT in terms of market share, believe it or not. So the new SAT looks a whole lot like the ACT, which is nice. But there are some, definite strategies that we need to take into account for both of these exams. And again, Z-Prep, these guys are the ones that are experts, and they'll be giving you the best advice on that. Okay. So what's next? I studied. I took a test. How did I do? That's always the question you get. Is 26 a good score on the ACT, or is a 1430 a good SAT score? Well, either one of those scores could be either really good or not so good, depending on the institution that we're really looking at, right? So, for example, if we're going to the University of Chicago, a 26 is not going to cut it, and a 1430 may not cut it even close. So, we need to really start considering, are we in line to do this type of school or that type of school? What's important to us? Not what's important to the rankings, not what's important to the other neighbors down the street, but what's important to our student in our family. So what I've done here is I've listed, oh gosh, 30 or so different criterion by which people will select colleges, co-op programs, size, location, attrition, how many faculties have PhD, what's the tutoring program like? If my student is dyslexic, is there a strong disability services program? All of these things are kind of hidden sometimes in the weeds behind these rankings. So what I would suggest is taking a quick look at this slide and pulling off 3 or 4 or 5 most important deals to you and your student. And of course, this is not all, right? There are some other ones too. So let me give you another dose of criterion. Campus setting. Do we really want to be in a business program that's out in a very rural setting? I haven't had too many students request that. What's the financial aid history look like? What's the bottom line cost look like? By the way, if you would like to take a college for a test drive, you can go to the financial aid webpage of every school, and they are required by law to have a net price calculator. So write that term down, net price calculator. And if you're looking at Bentley College in Massachusetts, you can go in there and take a quick look and see, hey, what would the bottom line notionally look like for my family? Very, very useful thing to do, okay? Okay, so if we don't go through these factors, and what I would suggest that we do actually is take those factors down that are most important and do your own U.S. News and World Report ranking, okay? Get a spreadsheet, list the top 7 or 10 or 12 things that are most important to your student and to you, and then look at the 8 to 10 colleges that we're evaluating and look at all the elements. That is a very nice way of really tackling the situation. Okay. Otherwise, we're left to the David Letterman top 10 ways of choosing schools, which include, hey, my boyfriend's going there, my girlfriend's going, all of my friends are going to this school. Education is cool at Pepperdine University in California and Malibu. Freshman dorms practically on the beach. Party school, don't tell dad. Good sports. Many other things. Peer pressure, right? A lot of our students go to college or high school prep places where there's a lot of pressure to get into the top schools. Okay, parents, we're not immune. We're going to pick colleges based sometimes on this, followed by this, shortly thereafter by this. So yeah, we know, we get it. Finally, quality of education shows up. The legacy sometimes is on the list of criterion. This was my mom and a map of Texas with Houston, where I grew up. Any school within 2-hour drives of home was fine, so I ended up on the East Coast. It was great. Bumper sticker, Princeton's going to look great on the back of my car. Okay, got it. So those are some, kind of humorous, tongue-in-cheek ways on how students and parents will sometimes pick. But this is how I would like a student answer the question, how are you choosing your school? Well, I'd love to attend XYZ University. Well, stop right there. That implies that we've done a lot of digging. We have looked at the curriculum, okay, of the campus. We know what we want to study. Maybe we visited. We've talked to professors. We sat in a class. We've eaten the food. We kind of have an understanding of what's happening on this campus socially. I've looked outside of the campus and said, yeah, this is safe or not safe, things like that. So we need to get a little further than just the sticker, okay? It's a great opportunity for me to study fill in the blank, okay? Now, parents, I know most of us didn't know what we wanted to do when we were, age 18 or 17. That's still the case for a lot of students. So if your students in that realm, do not worry. That's fine. I would highly suggest, though, that we start looking at doing some assessment, whether it's a personality assessment, a career search type of thing, an interest survey, aptitude exams. There's a lot of things out there to choose from. We need to start digging into that. Even in the sophomore year, it's totally fine to start exploring, right? Because we need to know by the time we're at the end of the junior year, we really should have a good grasp of what building on campus we'd like to go to. Okay, in fact, the university is well known for an outstanding faculty and is credited as being one of the best universities at which to study said major. Perfect. And by the way, they offer really good financial aid and merit scholarships in comparison to a short list of competitive colleges. Okay, that's pretty complete. I like it. All right, so the top 12, we have to gain acceptance before any of this stuff really matters. And what I've done is I've borrowed this from the Independent Education Consultants of America website, IECA. And what they did is they polled these selective schools around the country and said, hey, what are you guys really looking for in granting admissions to students? And you're going to see up here these are, by the way, in order. So rigor and curriculum, grade point average, SAT and ACT consistent with a grade point average. Those top three, where do those show up? Those show up from the transcript from the high school. So college planning really begins freshman year when we start picking school, classes, or in eighth grade or seventh grade even, as we pick some of the more advanced math courses, for example, in middle school. So I cannot emphasize the importance of a good transcript from the high school. Okay. Now, don't get bent out of shape if your high school does not offer 500,000 AP exams and is ranked number 3 in the nation. Don't worry about that. Colleges will adjust for that sort of thing, but they will want to know: did your student really dig into what was offered? Well, back when I was in high school, my dad said, "Hey, get a 4.0, just take regular classes." Well, maybe that worked 30 years ago. It does not work today. We really need to press forward and show the colleges that you can do college level work to the best of your ability. Okay. Well-written essay up at number 4. So that is, I think, probably well placed. Colleges really want to see what motivates the student. What is their passion? How do they relate with others? What are their ethics and morals? What are their personality traits? Right? Because what they're getting on their radar scope as they start to admit students are a bunch of data points. That's it. So this essay, or these essays, I should say, are very important for the student. They need to spend a lot of time with these, not just jam it out the night before. Okay. Passion and involvement, that goes back to a resume. Leadership and initiative shown on the resume. Diversity, ethnic, geographic, economic, cultural. Okay. Intellectual curiosity through reading and hobbies, demonstrated interest in the college. Here we go. We talked about that a little bit before. Recommendation letters. Those are pretty low on the totem pole, aren't they? Right? Special talent and abilities, and then out of school experiences, things like travel. Okay, so that can help out. I want you to be thinking about these things no matter what part of the process that you're in. Notice a lot of these things drive straight back to either a resume or the transcript. Okay. So our collective fascination with the Ivy Leagues and selective colleges kind of blurs the higher education reality. Okay, I borrowed this from John Bockenstedt at DePaul University. There are 15 colleges out here. Let me annotate this here. Just bear with me just one moment here. Okay. So over here you can see on the graph, there are 15 most selective colleges in the country. Whoa, didn't mean to do that. These guys have admissions ratios less than 10%. Okay, 240,000 people will apply for 12,000 spots. Okay, what does that look like? It looks like a lottery to me. Okay, that is incredibly competitive. And for example, I visited the University of Chicago a couple of years ago, and they showed me an applicant who got admitted and the one that didn't on their dossier. They were incredible, both. There were fine nuances that selected, or that differentiated the person that went to the wait list versus the person admitted. So if your student is denied from one of these places, I do not want anyone to be shocked, because these are just hyper competitive. I would say the same thing here with these 45 highly selective schools. Now we're talking admissions ratios that may range up to 20%. 570,000 people will apply for 40,000 spots. Okay, again, kind of a crapshoot here. Okay, so then we go up a little bit, maybe to a 30% or 35% acceptance ratio, and then we've got 275 colleges. Gang, our students tend to be much more competitive in this range. Very somewhat or not, okay? And let me tell you, there are far more schools that are in the somewhat category where their admissions ratios are in the 50s or 60% ratios. Yeah, there are some public institutions that are very highly sought after, like Colorado and Boulder. Their admissions ratio is up around 80%. So it's not super hard to get into some schools that are well sought after. So we need to think about that, especially if our student doesn't have a perfect SAT or a perfect grade point average, that sort of thing. Okay. So my moral here is do not try to apply to all the Ivies and think, oh, well, I got my bases covered. That's just not the reality of higher ed today. Okay. All right. So I'm going to move on. 5 important questions to ask universities. Well, what are the most important things for DePaul or Trinity College or, SCAD? Okay, well, maybe we need to ask this, during the process and find out what the pressing points are for admissions to these schools and how are they internally ranked in the admissions committee. Okay, so I would get really comfortable with talking to admissions reps. 30 years ago, guys, admissions reps were gatekeepers. Not so much anymore. Most of these guys and gals that go on the road are recruiters. They're salespeople for the college. Now, the more selective they get, the less salesy they are and more gatekeeper they are. So just, word of the wise there. How many times or how many of your students graduate on time and how many come back after freshman year? These are money questions in my mind. So if you're taking some notes, I would write down this website. It's called collegeresults.org. Okay, collegeresults.org. That gives you the 4, the 5, and the 6-year graduation rates of all the colleges in the country, including retention ratio, which is how many freshmen come back after freshman year. So very important to know those things, eyes wide open before selecting schools. By the way, most college admissions folks will quote the 6-year graduation rate when they talk to families or publish data on their website. Okay, so very important that you kind of have that in your back pocket. Okay, rules of thumb. Be an educated consumer. Use a top-down approach. Okay, so don't just rely on neighbors or friends or a single visit to a college. Use every bit of information that you can grab. Okay, so the whole goal is to apply to 8 to 10 schools and make sure you visit the campus. I always laugh. I make a kind of a joke at this, but it's a true story. My first roommate at the Naval Academy lasted 9 hours. That's it. So that's an extreme, situation, but still, we don't want students going to a college and then, quote unquote, boomeranging, coming home after the first semester. Okay. Make sure the college will actually want to admit your student before you apply. Well, yeah, with 20% or less admissions ratios, boy, that's hard to predict whether the school will let you in or not. But for most of the other ones, you can just simply look at the statistics from last year's freshman class, okay, and compare your student to that, and pretty much make a decision as to whether or not that college will really be rolling out the red or green carpet to you guys. Okay, so applications are in. Great. This is the question I typically get around about March of the senior year. How am I supposed to pay for this? We've got the financial aid, but there's a gap. What do we do? Okay, so let's talk about financial aid and some of these other issues here. So let me go back here. Okay, so financial aid is based on need and merit. Okay, so need is basically family income, the assets, the number in college, many other factors. Merit-based aid is based on grades, GPA, class rank, extracurricular activities, all sorts of things. But generally speaking, most of us think that, hey, need-based aid and merit-based aid are separate. They don't touch each other. In most cases, that's the truth. But there are some limited times where to get merit-based aid, you actually have to do the FAFSA, or they're looking at FAFSA kind of data. Okay. So how do the colleges determine if the student is actually eligible for need-based aid? So it's a very simple equation. Cost of attendance, which you guys know, minus this expected family contribution equals need. Okay. So that's the first part of the equation. You can see I've given you an example here. Cost of attendance is $48,000 a year minus $32,000 for the EFC. Well, $32,000 is what the government said is the minimum your family could pay. So this EFC number, or expected family contribution, comes out of the FAFSA. Okay, think of it as your college tax. Okay, so when you net those two things together, you have a need-based aid eligibility of right around $16,000. Okay, great. All right, so if you brought in outside scholarships, let's say like from an HEB scholarship or a local scholarship, of $2,000. Some schools, especially state institutions, are likely to reduce your need-based aid perhaps to this $14,000 figure. So um, anyway, I just wanted you to be aware that that may happen at some institution. If you're at all concerned about that, call the admissions office, call the financial aid office of the school that you're looking at, and they'll give you the data for that school. Okay, so next slide. Where is the beef? Where's the money? Bottom line is that the money is held right here. Let me annotate this for you so that you can see. Money is actually right here in this quadrant. Institutional grant aid, $34.9 billion. Okay, that is the money that's in the hands of the college. Okay, so yes, we can go out and find scholarships from the outside. That's like 1% of this sliver right here. But the real funding is within this quadrant. Okay, so that means, for example, the SAT and ACT, that can mean huge money for your student. Okay, so I have an anecdote that I experienced with a client a couple years back where the student had a 24 on the ACT. Okay, nice score, not bad, not great. But this student was applying to a mid-tier private institution, which I won't name, but it's a big school. It's about 15,000 students, very visible, huge football program, nice place. Well, the admissions rep for this institution said, look, if you go back and redo the ACT and give us 2 more points, we'll give you another $5,000 a year per year. So that's a $20,000 difference for 2 points on the ACT. Okay, I think I got everyone's attention here and have highlighted why, prepping for the SAT and ACT is so pivotal in today's age. Okay, all right, so how and when to apply for aid? Well, guess what? The FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, just opened, right? On the 1st of this month, the CSS profile, that is the FAFSA on steroids, basically, is the best way to describe that. That will open up, or the due dates will be a little later in the fall for seniors, and we'll kind of show that here on another slide. Or some colleges have their own institution-specific financial aid forms. Okay, so we might see that from school to school. And then finally, scholarship forms. Take a look at that, because not all colleges will automatically consider your student for scholarships. You have to look and see on their application whether or not there's another application or an essay that has to be filed. Okay, the power of one form, the FAFSA. I like to show this slide to illustrate a couple points. These families are exactly the same, okay, but their expected family contribution numbers are different. Okay, well, it's has to do with a couple basic things, like, did the family read the directions? Did they put the assets down in the wrong place? Did the family size change? What about home equity? All these things may play into an EFC. Well, first off, if you put home equity down as an investment in, that's not what the FAFSA is asking for. So that's a mistake, and that can drive an EFC number up. Or if your grandma of the student passed down money in the student's name in a uniform gift to minors account, sometimes that can artificially inflate the EFC number. So you can see some differences here. The question is, wouldn't it be good to know the expected family contribution number now, before you ever start to file the form? And if you're taking notes, again, I want you to go to the FAFSA Forecaster website. Okay, if you just Google FAFSA Forecaster, you'll find it. Okay, you can dump in your data, and it will give you kind of an estimation of what the EFC number will look like for your student. Okay, all right, good to know. All right, I'm going to briefly touch on this. This is strategic enrollment management. These are things that are really driving the industry today. And most of us would really probably agree with the idea that the rankings, the situation for competition for better students, net tuition revenue for the colleges, need for diversity on campus, improving student persistent rates, these are all things that the colleges are really looking to do. And so if you would just take a moment, read this quote. Okay, in higher education, enrollment management is the strategic and selective use of offers of financial aid to shape the composition of the incoming class and furtherance of the institution's goals. It's distinguished from the allocation of financial aid based on need or merit. Well, what am I trying to say here? Is that these this system here, this need-based aid system, is really changing. And merit-based aid and need-based aid are kind of coming together. On the surface, it looks like they're two disparate things, but colleges are using them in tandem to reach the best students and lure them in using money. Okay, so that's what that's all about. And I'll kind of show some examples of that here in a second. Okay, so let me get out of this. Okay, awesome. Okay, so most private schools will do this, many public schools will do this. Think about what the college needs, not necessarily what the EFC need is of the family. Okay, so here you're going to see a sales funnel, so to speak. This comes directly from a white paper that informs, college admissions VPs on how to enroll a class. So it starts with recruitment. They buy a bunch of names, they go out on the road. The institution decides who to market to prospective students. Well, then the prospective students become this inquiry pool, and then the prospective student decides whether or not they really want to pursue the college, whether they show up, whether they start to respond to some of the marketing, things like that. And ultimately the colleges want this application to show up, so the inquiry person, the student, decides who to apply to, and then finally the institution decides who to admit, and then finally as we go down this sales funnel, so to speak, the college decides who to enroll, and then the college will really try to retain and have a lot of engagement with alumni. So these colleges are really thinking long term about the value of each prospective student that they bring into their institution. It's not just about getting a freshman class built, it's also about alumni and support from the alumni. So this is a much, much bigger schema than what we're myopically focusing on right now in the admissions realm. Okay, so this is borrowed from a white paper that I found doing research at the University of Texas. This is a little dated. This shows a private institution in Oregon. This is kind of like cosmic top secret stuff. The colleges would never show you this. This is a grid. Every one of your students will end up on a grid, okay, based on need ranking and basically merit. Where's the student in relation to all the other students in the applicant pool? Okay, so I'm going to annotate this as well. Okay, so let me spotlight a few things here. Okay, so if we look at this, the academic rank here goes from 1 to 5. So when you're an academic rank number 1, that means you're really low in their applicant pool. If you're number 5, you're way at the top. That's great. If you're in the need rank of 1, that means that you really don't have any need basis. In other words, you're very rich, wealthy. Down here in need rank number 7, you're practically destitute. You have a 0 expected family contribution. What's interesting, if you have a student that's not very bright and very, very needy, this institution might offer $5,000 to these students and have 52% of them show up. Wow, okay, that's interesting. We're up here, if you're in the middle of the pool, an average student with, let's say, average finances, they might offer $3,000 and get only 25% of these students to show up. Okay, this is advanced marketing. It's advanced business. These colleges use predictive modeling to figure out who's actually going to show up at what price. Okay, so what I always emphasize here is look at the difference between category 4 and 5. Category 4, let's say you're starting at $4,000, but then you boost yourself into category 5, you're getting $6,000 more a year. That's a huge jump, where nowhere else on this grid would you see such a big jump. So this tells us a story. We need to be highly positioned in the applicant pool when it comes to GPA, standardized test scores, things like that. Okay, so anyway, strategic enrollment management grid, not something that you'll see every day. Hopefully that will bring some good background to the decisions that you guys make. Okay, so let's talk about some timelines. Freshman year, work on study habits, visit college fairs, let's plan for the resume, let's start some enrichment activities, plan for challenging courses during the sophomore year. Really, the freshman year is very different. Your students coming into their own, they're not in middle school anymore, but they're still very young. Okay, so they need to be influenced here. To work hard in school, the core of their grade point average is really being formed here in the freshman year. Very important year. Sophomore year, again, study skills. We need to build those. visit maybe some nearby colleges. Again, take part in enrichment activities. Think about, again, what career field am I gunning toward? How can I do some extracurricular things that will support that potential major? Um, Maybe in August of the sophomore year, study for the PSAT. That's a great place to begin. Perhaps do a personality assessment because that's not likely to change over many years. Visit some campus fairs or college fairs and work on the resume. Okay. Junior year is the bigaboo. This is the one where a lot of heavy lifting happens. Career search and aptitude testing. The PSAT begins in October. That is the NMSQT, or the National Merit Scholarship Qualification Test. The SAT and ACT tests really crank up during that year. Begin the college list in earnest. Really, earlier is better on that. Parents, run an EFC mock-up. Use that FAFSA forecaster website. See, hey, am I qualifying for need-based aid? Am I not? Or am I going to be in the middle somewhere? Okay. Academic resume, definitely continue to work on that. Search for some scholarships. So I kind of poo-pooed the idea of doing some scholarships before, but I would definitely say if we're not studying for the SAT or ACT, we should look for some local scholarships. Okay, campus visits. Cannot emphasize that enough. Talk with your CPA or financial advisor if you employ those folks. And then also be looking at college cost containment strategies during the junior year specifically. Senior year, we have to finish strong, right? Because a lot of students will kind of say, well, senior year is not a big deal. They're not going to look at the 7th semester transcript. There are some cases where colleges will definitely do that. So we need to really have a good docket of senior year classes and work hard. Okay. Retake the SAT and ACT again in the fall semester. Finalize your college list, 8 to 10 schools. Do some more campus tours. Really visit all the way through until May 1st. May 1st is the acceptance response that is due back to the college. Okay. So June through November is application season. Everyone's cranking those out during that time. Housing applications go in pretty quickly after you do the apps. October 1st is the earliest filing deadline for FAFSA, earliest time that you can put one in. Try to do it in September, it won't work. Okay. October through November really is the CSS profile time. December we'll see institutional forms. The award letters that come out of the financial aid process, really those show up all over the place. Last year, the federal government instituted a new policy on the FAFSA where they're taking a look at 2 years prior data. So if your student's an 18 grad, the 2016 data is used for the financial aid. So make a long story short, that was done with the intention of having you guys as parents getting those financial aid forms in your hands earlier, the financial aid award, so that you can make a choice over a period of months. I didn't see it happen last year. It was the financial aid award coming out in February, March, just like every other year. Maybe different this cycle. I don't know. Okay. Finally, your student has to give a yes or a no to a college by the 1st of May. Okay. Okay, a few case studies. I'm going to run through these quickly. Let me look at timing here. Yep, we're right at time. So I'm just going to give you one or two of these. Okay, so here's the student with an econ major, had a 1550 SAT, national merit finalist, looked at 9 colleges nationwide. Their EFC was $20,000 a year based on a $92,000 income, really high. They said, we need merit aid. And I said, yes, let's go find that. And they found it at University of Arizona. Now, keep in mind, this student came from Texas. So initially, a lot of parents would be like, no, we're not going to look out of state. It's too expensive. Well, they gave him $30,000 a year off as a discount. So there's no way they could have attended anywhere in Texas for cheaper than that. So they ended up going to U of A. They saved $120,000 off that cost of attendance figure. Remember why I labeled that MSRP? Yeah, that's the sticker price. It's not the bottom line price. But like that other slide I showed you, this student was denied at Stanford, Harvard, and Yale. Okay. Another student, journalism, with a 1360 SAT score, looked at 16 colleges nationwide. Income was at 112. They had $214,000 in taxable assets with an EFC number of 24. Okay, that's a high number, but boy, wait a second, what happened here? We had all this money on the radar. I thought that was going to really jack up this expected family contribution. Well, it actually did. What had happened behind the scenes that you can't see from this is that they had 2 students in college. So the moral of the story is when you have 2 students in college, you can actually expect an expected family contribution number to be cut in half. Okay, the student is going to St. Edward's here in Austin, $45,000 a year cost of attendance, which has gone up radically since then. They got $12,000 scholarships and grants per year. So you can see that they got both need and merit-based aid. Okay, well, we told them, hey, you have a competitive award from a different school. Go back and see if St. Ed's will give you a little bit more. Sure enough, did. In this case, they awarded another $5,000 a year, so they saved another $20,000 off the cost. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to move down to what do we do? Okay, so what does College Inroads do? Just really quickly, we specialize in career assessment. We use multiple modalities to help students figure out what building do we need to be in on campus. We help students develop their resume. What does it need to look like? Most students don't even come in with a resume. Interview preparation. If we're going to be interfacing with college reps, we need to know how to dress, what to be prepared for, what questions should we be asking versus being asked, things like that. College selection, we help with that, depending on affordability for the family and the geographic concerns and majors and all that kind of stuff. We help students get this way down, so they're not looking at 2,200 schools; they're looking at a much smaller number. We will help them in the application process with their applications. We also will brainstorm and help critique their essays, which tends to be a real time-consuming process for everybody, but also very, very important. And then we offer online SAT, ACT prep. Guess through who? ZPrep. So it's targeted college preparation for your student, no matter what year they're in. Okay, so good news. We're done. What do we do next? What are your next steps here from tonight's meeting? Calculate your EFC. Get out there, go on the web, figure that out. I think that's a really good, easy way to begin this process. Work on some college research. As I suggested, build a matrix. Get working on the timeline that we talked about. Visit some colleges. Determine your college budget, gang. I'm going to tell you, that is the most difficult thing to do. I don't care if you're a student, a family of means or not. How much can you actually bear? That's a very important thing that will drive the college list. Meet with College Inroads. We will give you guys a free consultation if you'd like to take advantage of that, and I'll give you the contact information here in a second. A tip on what not to do: don't do this. Don't put your head in the sand and wait for things to happen. Be proactive in this. So, how to reach College Inroads? Here's the web address and email. Here's our office line. If you'd like to talk to us, we'd be very, very happy to chat with you individually about your student. Tonight we talked about the big picture, but if you'd like some coaching on what to do, certainly we'll give you an hour of our time. Okay, and ZPrep, how to contact ZPrep. If you're not a ZPrep client, if you go to their website, which is at ztestprep.com, you can find a program near you and contact the local folks. So that is the end of the presentation. I'm going to go into the questions and answers here. Let's see. Okay. Yep, I'm going to open up questions. If anyone has questions, I will answer those here at this point. We had some questions here, but unfortunately it was stuff that was like, hey, go back to the last slide. I'm not sure which slide we were on at that point, so I apologize. Okay, let me see if there's any other chats or anything else going on. I don't see any, but I wanted to thank you all for being here tonight. Again, I'm going to put back up on the slideshow the contact information for both entities, for both ZPrep and College Inroads. Again, there's College Inroads. If you have any questions that pop up, that's how you can call us or get in touch with us. And then finally, with ZPrep, their website is the best and easiest way to get in touch with your local provider of ZPrep. So, gang, I hope you've had a great time tonight. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. My best hope for your student success. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Have a great evening.